I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Access Advisory Committee for May. First thing would be roll call. Please, can we start at this end?
Nick Kuntz here. Oh, wait. Nick Kuntz here.
Barbara Silver here.
Bob Burnham here.
Jim Marston here.
Mike Wiltshire, city staff, and Tina Diaz, city staff. I'd like to just note that Karen Johnson and Jacob Lesner Buxton are not present.
Okay. We haven't heard from Martha.
There's Martha.
All right. I'll call Martha DeGasis in.
All right, River.
Okay. We have some visually impaired people here, so could the people in the audience please give me their names?
My name is Suzanne Grimacy. I work with Behavioral Wellness, and I also work at the Emergency Operations Center.
Thank you.
Yolanda Guinty, Emergency Services Manager for the city.
Danny Anderson, Executive Director, Independent Living Resource Center.
Okay, thank you. The first item here is public comment. This is only for those things that are not on the agenda, but just a public comment to the group. You can have up to 5 minutes. But please don't talk about something that's on the agenda that comes later. And if you don't know, you can fill out a public comment form and give to Tina.
Yes.
Do we have any public comments? I take that as a no.
I have a quick question. I'm trying to use my iPad, and I get the message that the Wi-Fi network at Santa Barbara City Wi-Fi is not connected to the internet. Is there some way to enable it?
Maybe I can offer a suggestion. I used SB City Wi-Fi, and I was able to get on the internet. There's multiple connection options here.
Well, I guess it's not essential, but I'll
Okay.
deal with
Could
it
you
at
help
the
at all?
break.
Maybe
Would
they
you like
could
me to
do
take
it.
a look and see if I
Sure.
can? Yeah, I got it.
Okay, next is the approval of the minutes from February. Are there any changes or suggestions here?
Oh, I have a problem with item number 8, the last bullet point. The second point. Get it?
Barbara, I think you're connected.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So I was not at the last meeting, so I was going simply from the audio file. And in number 8, there's something that confuses me. There seems to be in Jim's report or comments something about Justin, which contradicts what I understood him to say before, but I'm not quite sure what this comes from since Justin wasn't listed as present at the meeting. So Jim, maybe you can say more.
I think the confusion was that an item was put in there that said that Justin wrote that said that the Cabrillo Arts Pavilion, which we brought up at the last meeting, was permitted under the 2013 code. The confusion here is that they use the word permitted to mean the permit was issued under the code of 2013. So they call it permitted, which does not mean it was approved or legal. It just was used to say the permit was issued under that code. And since that time, he has communicated with me after I told him what the code was, that they're going to change it. I thought I turned that off, sorry. I told him about the code, he said, yes, we're going to fix that, and I know that now. The provisions have actually gone into the building department. So,
But what is this doing in the minutes, since it's not in the audio file?
I don't think it should be there. I think that's a valid point. It was not said at the meeting. So, you want to strike that?
Well, I think it should be.
Okay.
I don't believe it belongs.
I agree it should
I'd
be
like the
there.
minutes corrected to omit that last 2 sentences, which
Okay.
are not supported by the audio file.
Is there any other comments on the minutes?
If that's a motion, I would second it.
No, it's just a correction to the minutes.
Could someone make a motion to accept them with that correction?
So moved.
So moved, I second.
We got that?
So we'll accept the meeting minutes with that correction.
Yes.
I'll make that correction and we can post final meeting minutes.
that would make me very happy.
Okay.
Do we need a roll call vote on that, or?
No.
Sorry about that, folks. Okay, the minutes have been approved with that one correction. And then committee member reports and staff announcements. So Mike, do you want to go first? You have any staff announcements?
Nothing pertinent. I just wanted to remind the group that we presented to council on May 1st. We gave our annual update, which is hopefully going to be annual now.
Good.
It went positively. They were receptive. Jim Marston was there. Barbara Silver was there. They both had a chance to speak as well. So it was good to get some face time in front of council and let them know what we're doing. Good. And just a reminder, we have a couple big items on the agenda today. I think there's a lot of potential for a lot of discussion. So I'm just going to try and keep it moving along for the respect of our guests and ourselves to try and wrap this one up on time. That's it.
Any announcements? We'll start from this end. Nick, do you have any
Yeah, I do have a brief announcement.
committee reports?
So it came to my attention a couple of days prior that the Planning Commission reviewed a draft City of Santa Barbara access and parking design guidelines yesterday. So I wrote to the Planning Commission and transportation planners outlining some concerns that I had personally, and one was that the AAC was not involved. There's a lot of dated language that promoted ableist attitudes. It included valet. There was mention of valet operations, but didn't seem to be consistent with what we'd been hearing from the downtown parking committee in regards to the ordinance. And I urged the Planning Commission to engage the AAC with this. I received some response from Assistant Transportation Planner Andrew Perez that was very positive, and he thanked me for my interest and diligence, and gave assurances that my recommendations would be incorporated. And when he presented to the Planning Commission yesterday, some of those concerns were certainly incorporated. In his email to me, he was seeking further clarification on person-first language, whether to specifically to eliminate the reference to handicap parking, and my suggestion was to replace with either disabled or accessible. And he asked if the committee had a preference. I don't know, it wasn't appropriate for me to respond for the committee, so I didn't. I thought maybe we could get a decision here and I could give feedback. Maybe staff could give that feedback. I don't know how to handle that. I watched the Planning Commission on City TV last night. There was no mention of the AAC by Planning Commission, so I'm not sure if they got my suggestions. Clearly the planning staff did, and so I'm going to follow up and determine what happened there, if it was just dismissed by Planning Commission or didn't make it to them somehow. But the end result was the motion passed 5-1 to send it to the City Council. So I would urge anyone with an interest, since it doesn't look like we will be permitted as a group to give comment, that you should send your individual comments.
Thank you. A quick question for Danny Anderson, the Executive Director of IRC. What would you pick if you had a choice, accessible or?
Accessible.
Okay.
Yeah, disabled could change like handicap did, so
Right.
accessible
I think
seems to.
accessible.
I like accessible.
I think we need a vote, or just think, I think you should tell them.
I think it would be most appropriate to come from staff.
Yeah, that's noted, and it's, the staff would appreciate any input on this, because I can relay to all of all city staff as to what the appropriate way to refer to this to.
Forgive me, I'm still getting my bearings on this process. It's,
Yeah.
you know, you've been involved with the city and for a long time, and this is, you know, only a year old to me and only quarterly. So I promise I'll get there and I'll learn to play nice.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could just tell them accessible is the least
I think that's a
pejorative
consensus.
term.
And Danny and the ILRC, if there's any material on proper verbiage or preferred verbiage that captures not just this specific
I'm
for
looking
accessible parking.
online now, it certainly seems like accessible is the word
Right.
du jour.
And
Yeah,
Dan-
we'd be
Danny
happy. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Danny does have a list of that kind of thing, people first vocabulary, so.
Yeah.
I'll reach out to you, Danny, and see what you have, and we can
Yeah,
get that from
that'd
you.
be
So
great.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you.
There's a comment that I like, and I'd like to read it. It says, "There are no shades of accessibility. For example, for instance, a parking space either meets the requirements and is accessible, or it does not meet the requirements and is not accessible." And then it goes on, but that makes it really clear.
Any other comment from members?
Jim, I have one quick announcement. We had our first meeting of the ad hoc committee on February 5th to discuss sidewalk issues in Santa Barbara and promoting a safer path of travel for pedestrians. And that first committee meeting went very well. I don't have a detailed report. There was a meeting, I believe, in early April, which I was unable to attend, so I'll try to follow up with more of a report in the next meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, Martha and I were at the one that Bob missed on the sidewalk subcommittee, and Martha's been doing a good job collecting photographs and details of places that need attention. Do you have any other info you want to add to that?
Not really at this time. I think it's kind of an ongoing, slow process of continuing to identify and categorize the
I apologize
hazards.
for missing that meeting.
Oh, I'm not excused. Good. Okay, for myself, I attended the downtown parking meeting last week. As Mike mentioned, I was at the council meeting. Interesting point was I went to the appeals board last month where the museum was there. They were one of the pictures that I showed of inconsistent tactile domes. And I asked if they were going to fix that during the project, and they said yes. So that's another plus for that. That and the one from Justin, and then there's also something at the Hotel California, which I'll bring up later, but those were partially fixed. Okay, well, I had a few other, and I also met with Mr. Stuffer, the building official, to discuss some things. That was last week, that was very important. Okay, next we come to the Thomas Fire and Debris Flow Accessibility Communications. City of Santa Barbara Emergency Services Manager, Yoli Vinci, can you help me with that?
No, you did fine.
Oh, thank you. I'll screw it up next time. To discuss Thomas Fire and Debris Flow Accessibility Communications, successes and areas for improvements. Okay, please.
Can staff adjust the air? I'm starting to get a little cold. Is anybody else experiencing that?
Yeah, I'm going cold. I brought a jacket, so I'm not. I'm
Sorry.
fine with that.
Good morning. I'd also like to introduce again Suzanne Grimacy from County Wellness Behavior, but she was actually one of the Joint Information Center leads, managers, I believe, and still working there. And again, Danny from IRLC. And I brought them with me because the City of Santa Barbara right now is in the process of updating the emergency operation plan for the city, and we want to make sure that we capture any lessons learned or any successes that we had during the two incidents that we went through just recently. And so I talked to Mike, and I thought this was a good time to come and kind of hear from the community some of the things that maybe didn't work or did work. And I also wanted Danny here to kind of talk a little bit about what the successes were in the collaboration between the city and the county and the Independent Living Resource Center. So first off, I have a few questions. And the first one was how readily available was the information or evacuation information for either the Thomas Fire or the debris flow? And I'm going to be writing, so I want to make sure.
I'll start off by answering, for those of us who have smartphones and are on the emergency alert connection, that works great, even though it wakes us up at 2:30 in the morning. It's nice to know, even though it may not be in the area where we're located, it's nice to hear those updates through the emergency alert system. So that's a wonderful thing in place. I'm just curious, how that works for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Is there an adaptation? Danny, do you know that, or would someone know how that works? The emergency alert system works for people that are deaf or hard of hearing?
Well, I believe do you want me?
You can use this one. Yeah. Just capture it a little better.
Suzanne, do you want to come up here too?
Yeah, you guys can join the table.
Get my coffee on the table, priorities, you know? Okay, so as far as for deaf, hard of hearing and the alerts, and Yoli may know too, I believe that it would be, they're alerted via vibration and text. So I think that it's just, they receive it differently, but they're still receiving the same information at the same time.
Good. As long as it's a form that's readily accessible, then when they notice it like we hear it very clearly on our phones. It's very loud, and it wakes us up, but it can be disconcerting, but it's so important to know that there's an emergency alert for either a flood or a fire encroaching on an area.
So Bob, if I may, I suspect that it's a matter of the individual's assistive technology that they have, and there's really not much that can be done at a system level, or is needed to be done to support that assistive technology, correct?
This is Danny. Yes, I think that it's definitely something that the individual needs to set up with their carrier or
Yes.
such. I will also say that as part of our reasoning for being here, ILRC during the emergencies, immediately all of our advocates went through their caseloads to ensure that we were able to contact those who were most concerned would not know about the emergency. As we learned from NAPA, many of the individuals who passed away were individuals with disabilities and older adults that just didn't hear the knock at the door or didn't have the technology to receive the alerts. So we wanted to ensure that that didn't happen here. So we were contacting individuals via telephone, going to their homes, any contact method that we could to ensure that they were kept abreast of what was going on.
One of the things I noticed is that going to Channel 20 to see what was happening, the news was really slow and coming up and sometimes was incorrect. So that's something that could be improved.
This is Suzanne. I can speak to that, and I appreciate the feedback on that, and I agree with you. And the way that the information works, anytime important information is going to go out, we talked about the emergency alerts, but there's other information that comes out not quite by your phone ringing in the middle of the night, but comes out. We do a number of things. We post the information on our website. We send it out to the media. We send it out by social media and Twitter. We put it on our Facebook page. We post it to 211. So there's a whole sequence of things, and one of those is updating the slides. And so there's a lot of sequences. The slides tend to be one of the last things to be updated. So that feedback is really good.
That's what I noticed, but it's one of the easiest to access.
Okay, so
Especially-
that's good feedback, and I'll take that back. Yeah, thank you.
It's quick and easy. You can do it in the dark.
Okay.
I also got a lot of emergency calls, and I would say that more is better than less. So if there's too many, personally, but it's better than nothing. So there's no problem there, no complaint.
My personal experience was they were very helpful, except for the one at 3 a.m. that said, "Get out now," and it did not apply to me in my location. I understand that this is fairly new technology. We're still ironing out the wrinkles, and I know that there was a much more problematic error in Hawaii around the same time, and so it's a relatively minor issue, and I'm sure it will resolve itself for us.
I would add to that it would be nice to get it more location-based so that people who are told to get out now are in that proper area. I know there's a lot of work, there's new tech, so no complaint, just something to work on. It's got to get it more
How do you
location-based.
coordinate with the county? Because some of these things are in the city, some of these things are in the counties. And from the website that looked like they were telling people, if you don't know where you are, then go look here. So it seems like there's a lot of confusion of the general population as to where they are and who they should be getting their basic information from.
Yoli, may I speak to that?
Sure.
So when it comes down to areas being evacuated and understanding, am I in a high-risk area, am I in an extreme risk area, we don't expect our community, this is new for us as of the last few months, to know exactly where you live. And the reality is, there are some people whose properties are halfway in this area and half in this area. So what do? So what we did, starting with the fire, and we've done this before with other fires, but it hasn't been a consistent practice. I'm sure now it will be. We developed an interactive map. And we did that so that so the community could use it as a tool, but it takes learning, but allowing you to enter in your address, and it will actually ping you on the map, and you can see exactly what area you're in. And so if an evacuation occurs, or if a warning occurs, the map will always, part of that communication, the map's always updated first, so people can go on and ping it and see. But we knew that was a new process for everybody, and we know that not everyone uses the internet and would know how to get to a map. So we set up with the Thomas Fire an information line or a call center. You might have heard it called the Thomas Fire information line or the debris flow. And we had that staff behind the scenes. It was about 10 people there 24 hours a day. As we moved into missing persons, we staffed it more heavily with clinical people. But anyway, that was the majority of calls that came in. People would call, some that are not even comfortable on a computer, and say, can you tell me if I'm in the evacuation area? Can you tell me? So they had that technology too. So it ended up being just an invaluable tool for us. It's still there, where you're still able to see, do I live in, whether we're evacuating or not, a high-risk area, an extreme risk area. So I don't know if that answers some of your question, but that was part of our communication.
It answers some of it, and then I was thinking also, because we're in this big tourist area, there are people who really don't know where to begin, so. And
we knew that too, and so our strategy for that is we made sure that information line was a toll-free number. So people could call from Kansas because they have a family member that lives here and they wanted to know if they're safe. And the fact is, there are many people living in the Montecito area who are older, and their children were the ones helping to steer their decision making. They lived out of the area. So this made that a tool that others could use out of the area too.
That sounds good. Where is that website where you can pin your address?
If you go to readysbc.org,
Okay.
that's our county website, and if
Okay,
you
the
look
county.
through the site, you'll see a section that says maps.
Okay.
And if you click on interactive map, there's a little area to the left where you can enter your address, you hit
Okay.
return, and it just pings you.
I think that phone number is really important, because during the fire, especially, internet service went down, or was unreliable, or these maps took a long time to load, and it was, having multiple ways to
Yes.
access information,
It
I
was-
think would be really critical.
We had the information line 211, could also be called, and any time we updated something, we personally we had a relationship with 211, right into the 211 website and updated their website. So if someone called 211 with a question, they had all the information there, but we also offered a texting capability. And we got many texts too. So we tried to offer options.
So when I would go look at 20 and find nothing, I
Yeah.
could have called 211.
211, or you could have called our toll-free information line, either one.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
A quick question for all three of you, Yoli and Suzanne and Danny. With the Thomas Fire and the mud flow, there was an increase in evacuation fatigue. Did you notice any scenarios where people who were elderly or less able, an increase in a real reluctance to leave if they were told to evacuate? Did that come up as a scenario?
This is Yoli. Yes, it did. And so what we're doing is we have a county, and this is part of the collaboration that the city does with the county. So we do have a public education and awareness committee, and we try to keep all of our preparedness information pretty much one way. We all talk the same language, we all say the same thing, but we're beginning to learn that the demographics are different in how we approach them. And so there was a lot of reluctance in regards to a lot of the elderly, the seniors that did not want to leave.
Sure.
So we're hoping that through the year, we're going to keep putting out information on being prepared, situational awareness, know where you live. These are the numbers that you can call. One of the things that the city did was we started putting out kiosks because we realized there wasn't a lot of people able to get on the internet, or again, the mapping was slow. I got a lot of calls, like Suzanne, a lot of calls from out of state. So I would work the computer, but I would get all my information from the county. So we had representatives in the county's Office of Emergency Management, or their Emergency Operations Center, and that's how that collaboration came together. So in regards to the Thomas fire, we actually had an officer who was up with operations, and he let us know 2 days before that they were going to start evacuating that they were. So it gave us the opportunity to get our policy group together and decide how we were going to do that. So all that collaboration really worked well in regards to how we worked together and making sure that we got the information out that we needed to.
I'd like to point out that I lived there by Paseo Nuevo, and they had a big easel there with a lot of data, but I don't recall seeing a timestamp on it. So and I saw a lot of visitors looking, and it's like, what, is this yesterday? Is this right now? I'm not sure, but I think that needs to be looked at. We're going to put a map up in public view. My other comment has to do with, I'm a geographer who works with spatial cognition and disability. And what I noticed on the text messages, they often, as you know, our town is facing a 45-degree angle roughly against the cardinal direction. So which way is north, you know, and which way is east. So many of the comments, and one of them that cracked me up or bothered me, said, if you're north or west of Mission Street. Well, I don't know what that means anymore. I know which way Mission Street runs. It runs at a 45-degree angle. But, so anyway, I don't want to be talking too much.
That's a lot of the reason that led us to developing the interactive map.
Right, I
So
understand that.
right.
But as a geographer, I know many people can't read maps.
Right.
And of course, blind people can't, but even sighted people some have a hard time with maps. So I'm just asking, I know it's tough, but.
But I mean, that was our hope, and instead of having to go onto a map and figure out where the streets were and are you north or south, you
Right.
could put in your address and it would pop you, and you'd
Okay.
see if I'm in the red area, then.
But
I
this
would-
is, oh, I'm sorry.
What I would have found helpful looking at that, because I found it confusing too, is if they would say, maybe north and west and bordered by, and then give the streets that border it.
Okay.
Yeah, that would help.
Or even as many people say here, mountainside or
Yeah.
Masonside, that sometimes is better for people who aren't cognitive of their cardinal directions.
Okay,
If you say State Street on the mountainside, we all know what that means.
all right.
If you say east of State Street, it's like, well, yeah. So anyway, just a thought about that, because of our weird layout here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yoli, you were going to say?
Yes, I was just going to say that, thank you regarding the maps, because there were dates on the maps, but they were so small, I couldn't see them.
Okay.
So I think putting dates up because I know there were dates on the press releases we put up, but I'll make sure that unfortunately, when we have to do this again, we will put
And times.
date and times, yeah.
Because
Usually,
It's moving so fast.
and what happens with the kiosks is we can't put anything up that hasn't already been sanctioned by the incident management team.
Right.
So usually the maps are about 12 hours old that are printed out.
Well, that's my guess, but you don't know that.
You don't know that, so
yeah.
I'm gonna make sure that those are date and
Okay.
time,
Yeah.
but we'll make sure also that the kiosks also have large enough, the date and times that
Okay.
everything was changed. And that's really good, and I really like the, when we do have to give out a text, we'll, put something like bordered or, the
Thank
ocean,
you,
the beach
because
says, yes.
It's so confusing in this area because there's streets that run straight and there's streets that run all over the place, even State Street,
Yes.
It runs two different directions.
And it's really hard when you evacuate one half of the street and the other half has to say, yes, I understand. So,
I had one more
any other-
comment. Are you gonna
Yes.
ask other questions, or this is just?
No,
one?
this is fine. I had questions, but it was
Okay.
only to generate conversation,
This
so I
is
can.
off that topic. but
Okay,
Back to the sign, as a geographer, I would listen to people talk about what that map meant, and they had all sorts of ideas of how old it was. So anyway, important. My only concern was, when it was time to get a mask. Okay, I'm visually impaired, I don't drive, so I would find out that this place has a map. Well, it was a 3-mile walk, so I go, oh, forget that one. Then you go someplace else, and they just ran out. So I know this was the first time. You guys did very good having a whole supply of maps all over masks, but they kept changing locations. I finally got to the police station, which was nearby. They could only give me one. But if I had friends at home or relatives, I couldn't just only get one. I understand why they can't give out more, but, and I know it'll be better in the future, but we need to have a little bit better organization of where they are, how many are left, or when they're gonna run out. I mean, different stores had them, and then an hour later you'd hear, oh, they're out of them. Now you gotta go to the East Side Library, now you gotta go to this place, so that's something I hope we can work on.
So I think that's an easy fix. We do that when it starts to rain. Even though we have free sandbags, we also list stores that have sandbags that you can purchase them.
Okay.
So we can do that as well. You know, the masks, those ran out.
And those are the N95s, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
You know, if you have a car, it's not that big a deal to drive 4 miles to a store, but if you're walking, then in that weather, you can't really do that. So anyway, if you can
Yeah. We-
clean up a bit.
The demand was, you know, unprecedented.
Sure.
Nobody could have imagined.
I'm not complaining.
I saw lines day after day at the Home Depot for those masks.
Yes.
Right. But it wasn't a complaint, just a suggestion.
Oh, no.
Try to get more, yeah.
It's a good suggestion and something that we can work on with logistics for, hopefully never again, but you know, it's not if, it's when. Any other comments on evacuations or signage? I wanted to ask also, we talked about Channel 20, but Channel 18, the city's channel, did that work? Was it slow? I mean, what were some of the things that you saw with the city's channel?
Yoli, my wife and I
Experience, we just turned on Channel 3, and Beth and CJ, I mean, they were almost doing constant coverage. I don't know when they slept, but you know, the news was pretty constant, and that's what we relied on more than Channel 18 or Channel 20.
Okay.
So, feedback on that?
I was hoping to mention what we talked about the other day with, is Channel 3 KEYT? I'm not a Santa
Yes.
Barbara resident. Okay.
Yes, it is.
I just wanted to let all of you know about ILRC's main involvement in this became about our interpreter, sign language interpreter registry, and keeping our deaf community knowledgeable about what was going on. It became where the best way to do that was just through the press conferences, and we had interpreters at all of those. The county and city were wonderful about working with us on that. But I do want to I don't know how many of you are aware that KEYT, for example, is a very small market station, of course, but it's considered a small town compared to Los Angeles. And I learned recently that the closed captioning is not live on KEYT. I don't know if any of you have ever turned it on and noticed that if they have side conversations, it's not captured in the captioning because all of that captioning is pre-scanned before the newscast begins. To get an emergency captioner to do live captioning, they're always swept up by the big markets in LA before Santa Barbara has a chance to do so. So during emergencies like this, that's why it was very important for the deaf community to have the interpreters at the press conferences. But individuals who are hard of hearing or just need the captioning and don't know sign language were really kind of left out of this equation with the captioning not actually being real-time captioning. So that's something that we are trying to advocate for, but it's difficult when there's not enough captioners and there's KTLA and Channel 7 and all that, so.
So automatic translation, artificial intelligence isn't taking care of this problem yet?
Not yet, not yet. Although when we went to KEYT about a year ago and had a tour and saw their equipment on how they do the captioning and all of that, they did mention that in the next couple of years they're hoping that it'll be all done electronically that way. But right now a person scans in papers and that's how it happens.
Sounds old school.
I would like to make sure that Danny described something that I thought was very important, which was where, when their clients were taken to evacuation centers, they would see if they needed their computer, if they needed their medication. Because when you don't drive and you're evacuated, and many people are, who with disabilities live alone or are elderly. They actually went out, I think you guys went out and actually brought stuff to them, right, that they needed, and that was very important, but that's only if you're a member of ILRC, so I think you should take a kudos for that and explain it real quick.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's in Ventura County and in Santa Barbara County, we were very active at the evacuation centers, ensuring that people were getting the accommodations that they received, whether that be assistive technology. I would also like to say that the Red Cross and the CERT teams and our involvement with the local VOAD is really the team approach that allowed us to be able to accommodate individuals with such a thing. You know, we live in a beautiful area where this doesn't happen very often, thank goodness, so people were just running out of their house and not thinking, oh, I don't know when I'm gonna come back and what should I take. So being able to use that kind of team approach to get them what they needed at the evacuation centers. It wasn't just ILRC, we were serving actually all individuals with disabilities who needed any kind of accommodation. We also utilized our state relationships with Cal OES to get assistive technology and things to people in the evacuation centers, which there was 6 in Ventura County, which started all of this. And then when things hit Santa Barbara, of course, we continued and only improved on the services.
Are you saying that both you and ILRC and the Red Cross would go to evac centers and ask anyone who needed help what they needed from their home and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. The Red Cross had nurses there 24/7 who were they had tables where individuals at the evacuation centers could go and be assessed.
Okay.
And also discuss what they needed, what they left at home, and then as a team, you know, they would contact who the appropriate contact was to make sure that it happened. I went to Rite Aid and got all kinds of things for people in Ventura, so
Okay.
that was happening at all the evacuation centers.
That's highly commendable. I'm very glad that happened.
Thank
That's
you.
good service for everybody.
And I also want to pitch, because County Public Health was a big contributor, and Direct Relief, they all contributed to help with all of the evacuees and everything that was going on. So I just wanted to let you know that they're a part of it. And VOAD is actually Volunteer Organizations Active in Disasters, and the city has a seat on that committee, so we're able, again, to have that collaboration throughout the county with all of our nonprofits and non-governmental agencies. And that's how we work together, because nobody can do this alone. So I didn't have much more other than, I think we talked about it a lot, on some of the things that we're looking at in regards to improvements and corrections is maybe working a little faster and getting the slides onto channel 20 and 18. And time stamping all of our kiosks, making sure that we have appropriate times and dates on those so everybody knows what they are. And masks, well, we'll try. And then IRLC will keep working with KUIT. And then we should have a draft of our emergency operation plan, I'm hoping by September. And I would really like to get input on the whole community portion of that plan from this group. And I will talk to Mike about possibly doing some type of a working group. Shouldn't take very long. I'd like to do that before I put it out to public comment, if that's appropriate.
The only one question for you, Suzanne?
Mhm. Yes.
I understand you did a pretty good outreach, especially with the Thomas Fire, I think, and maybe with MTV. You reached out to MTV as far as getting buses to areas at least where they could go to pick up people and bring them to a safer, low area. Is there anything further developing with that?
I can answer that one. That MTD is a special district and therefore part of the operational area, and they do have a seat on the VOAD.
Good.
So whenever they're actually a county resource as a special district. So if in the city we need to utilize them, and let's say Goleta needs them and somebody else needs them, then the county would help with coordinating how those buses would get to where they need to. One of the challenges that MTD has Because they have a lot of buses, they just don't have a lot of drivers.
Yeah.
And so it's getting the drivers in is, you know, some of the things that they're working on. But as a special district, we're hoping to get them more to the table with the emergency managers to talk about.
And to maybe to supplement that, is there any reaching out to Uber or Lyft to find more person power to at least create some sort of transportation to get to people?
Or taxi
Yeah.
companies.
Yes, love the ideas, and there's always ways for improvement, and there's always ideas that haven't been heard. Just to share a little bit about the transportation plan and how it involved, because I've never seen anything like this, so I think it merits sharing, and then I'll answer that question too. When we realized with the fire we were gonna have to evacuate a very significant area, anytime there's an area that big, you're gonna increase the probability of people with access and functional needs. I come from the mental health world, so more facilities with individuals with serious mental illness, all those types of needs. And so it took very little time for us to realize we very quickly needed a transportation plan. Calls were coming to the call center that would indicate that. So it literally within about 10 minutes, I kid you not, we were able to put together a plan where we used the county bowl as the main dispatch center. We utilized MTD, we utilized Easy Lift, we utilized ambulances, we utilized buses and vans from the sheriff's department. So we had this whole brigade of vehicles depending on what the needs were. And we had a system set up where people would call the call center and say, I have a transportation need. We would call the main contact and off they went. And it ended up to be just an amazing plan. Fast forward to other evacuations, we did get calls from Uber and Lyft offering their assistance, so they factored in as well. I wouldn't say that we have a policy and a practice for that, but the fact that all these things occurred the way they did, now that we're breathing again, allows us to look at how we actually make those standard practices going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Just a question for me. I didn't know this existed. I used to, all I had to do was call the evacuation center and ask for a transportation solution.
Not the although if you did call the
I'm sorry,
evacuation
wrong
center,
word.
they get to us, but yes, the call center.
Okay.
Yeah, that,
Okay, thank you.
that toll
It
free
wasn't on the
number.
web or anything, was it?
It was on the web.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we tried to announce it at every press conference, reminding people that this is the number to call for information or for transportation assistance, and we got a lot of calls for that.
Was it transportation only to an evac center, or could you get it to someplace else, like your friend's house in a safe area, or was it just for transportation?
It was primarily to the evacuation center, but then we would help make arrangements. So many people went to an evacuation center and then were picked up there by a friend that went elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. That's good planning.
So we're at our time. Danny, did you want to end with anything?
The only thing that I would mention was, you know, as an organization that serves both Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, I think we definitely saw strengths and weaknesses in both. But overall, I think that, you know, as communities that don't have much experience with these kind of disasters, both did very well. The transportation question did bring up, I think Easy Lift deserves quite the kudos because they were offering, you know, if you called 211, free accessible rides. Uber and Lyft are not accessible. So having as many universally accessible transportation options in the future, I think are you know, very important. But Easy Lift was wonderful, and I didn't see availability like that in Ventura County as much as I did here. So that was something that Santa Barbara really thrived with.
Final question, did UCSB offer any of their vehicles or vans or anything?
We didn't use UCSB vans, but it was not because they didn't offer or we didn't want to be quite honest. When I just shared the plan we didn't even get thought to the UCSB vans. So we had enough other vehicles at the time, but that's a great idea.
They do have a lot of vehicles.
They sure do. I didn't even think of that.
Good resource.
Yep.
Is that it? Any other questions? I really appreciate this. I think you all did a great job. I was really impressed myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. Okay, well, shockingly enough, we're on time so far now.
Right on time.
It's break time at 10:15. Can we have 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's do a quick 5 and then we'll come back and do valet ordinance. I feel like there'll be a lot to talk about there. So.
Okay. See you in 5.
I've had to ignore or?
Item on the agenda is Valley Parking Ordinance Update, downtown parking. Provide an update on the Valley Parking Ordinance prior to going to the ordinance committee. Mr. Victor Garza is here.
Good morning, members of the Access Advisory Committee. I'm Victor Garza, Downtown Parking Superintendent.
Good morning.
And I'm here to give you an update on our efforts to try to draft a valet parking ordinance. I think all of you know that I'm going to spend a little bit of time on some background and hopefully some context. Valets are operating out there right now. There's no ordinance to regulate how they operate. At least there's no way for city staff like myself to be able to administratively control, manage, regulate, even stop them from doing whatever it is they're doing right now. That's something that the police would have to do. Or if a citizen wanted to stop them, I guess they could seek remedies through the court system. So I think this ordinance would help us address, I think, a lot of mutual benefits, mutual issues, access for all being one very important one. I think I can with confidence say that downtown parking, we've been tasked with this work effort. It's going to be part of our responsibility to manage this downtown parking, this Valley Parking Ordinance. We're going to have to be the ones that issue the permits, that regulate, monitor, and at times maybe have to discipline, reprimand, or take measures against valet operators when they don't comply with the rules and regulations, and address also complaints that are given to us from the citizens. So downtown parking over the years has been one of the city's work groups that has acted proactively when it comes to access issues. We have always worked closely with the building department, with their CASPs and their plan checkers, to make sure that all of our projects include accessibility options or elements, so that when a project is completed on a parking lot, we know that we have the right number of accessible stalls, the right size, the right locations, the accessible paths of travel are taken care of, signage, everything. And so I just want to let you know that you can look at us as a partner rather than somebody trying to ram something past you. We want to work with you to address these issues because they're important to us too, because we serve the public. We want to make sure that they can feel confident that when they are on the street, that they're going to be enjoying access equally. So with that little spiel, I wanted to ask you if you guys had any comments. I'm here to get your feedback and ultimately seek your support in the approach that we're trying to propose, which is acknowledging that the existing valets, or it's probably most of them or all of them, are set up in such a way that they do not comply with the letter of the law. And so that is going to be a very difficult challenge. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that if we do find a solution, it's going to have to be something that is supported by all of you. We are not going to move forward unless we have that. We just can't. We know that when there are new valet operations proposed, that they have to follow the letter of the ADA. They've done that at the Hotel Californian. We've got a plan in the process of plan check over at the depot lot in front of the Reagan Center. So when they do valet operations, that'll also comply fully with the letter of the ADA. And if there are any other future projects that have an ADA, a valet component in the downtown parking lots, or if it's a new development on the streets that we have some say, then we're going to make sure that it also complies to the letter with the ADA rules and regulations. So
I'd like to start off if I could. Is that okay, Jim?
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Garza, thank you for bringing this to us. a lot of questions for clarification, but let me preface my remarks, my questions by saying this is a really comprehensive document, and I appreciate at least the intention of including us earlier in the process than we have been in similar scenarios with ordinances and projects coming either before the planning commission or an ordinance before city council. So thank you for including us, in that process, at least to give you some input. I was looking through the definitions, applicant, director, permittee, sponsor. First question, is the downtown parking group synonymous with the downtown parking committee?
No, the downtown parking group, it refers to city staff.
City staff. Okay.
The downtown parking committee is an advisory group.
Okay, good. So there is a distinction.
Yes, there is.
You mentioned downtown parking group, so that's a staff that oversees a lot of how this, as far as the regulations and all that.
Yes, the downtown parking, well, I want to say, let's call it a downtown parking program, over the years has evolved. We used to be limited to just the maintenance and operations of the parking lots, the city-owned parking lots. We've now been tasked with overseeing what happens with curb painting on the street, with the yellow and green and parking regulations, with the oversized vehicle ordinance, with a residential parking permit program, and now we've been tasked with the valet.
Okay. Good. Next question. Looking over this, not only ordinance, but all the set of rules and regulations, which appear to be really comprehensive. I couldn't nearly have thought of all these details, but if I'm a valet, either a sponsor or an applicant seeking a valet parking permit, I don't know if I'd be able to read through all this and understand it. Is there any effort to dumb this down to a simpler, kind of a dumb question for me, for an applicant to get his head around this and comply with all the rules that you set forth?
That's a great question, and my answer would be that there are very few valet operators in town. We have talked to them about these rules and regulations. They know about these rules and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So when they come in for a permit, it's not like it'll be the first time they've ever seen them. And when we get somebody that maybe has never operated in this town before, we're going to make sure that they understand all the rules and regulations, because it's important that they comply.
Thank you. Under the definitions, the valet zone, does that include a city street right-of-way? What do these include as far as zones? Parking lots? What are the variations in this definition?
As we look at this number 6 valet zone, what it refers to are the parking areas within the public right-of-way,
Okay.
not private streets or alleys. It also does include downtown parking lots, but that's covered under the downtown parking regulations.
Okay. And added to that, under section 1B, traffic engineer shall create a map of streets not suitable for valet parking operations based on considerations for traffic flow and safety. Is this an ongoing map that's being created, or how does that work?
Our intent here is that we don't want to have a valet operator come in and propose to set up shop on a street that we know is unsafe because of sight distance problems, or because the street's too narrow, or if it's a high traffic area.
Okay. I have some more questions, but I'll defer to my other committee members.
May I ask you a question first on your comment about you're having cast people at your garages? I know, as far as I know, all your garages seem to be very accessible and done correctly. Are you saying that you also have CAS inspection on street stuff and curb painting, or is it just the garages? I missed.
Yeah, the building department only has purview on private property.
Right.
And so we're considered private, the downtown parking facilities are considered private property, city-owned private property. So we asked them for their input early on in a project. We asked them to identify potential problems with because some of our facilities are old. For example, the Libero Garage has an elevator that goes to all of the decks. And we had some accessible parking spaces on the top deck, but unfortunately the slopes where the parking spaces were located didn't comply. So the compromise was to relocate them near the elevators. And so the building department gave us an exemption for the slope, but also required us to follow all the other specifications requiring the length and the hash marks and truncated domes and all the other parts that go into it.
Thanks.
So they do work with us when there is no way to comply 100% with the regulations.
So that leads to my question on which ADA professionals have been involved in the drafting of this ordinance and rules and regulations? Have you talked to CAS or any ADA specialists?
Early on in the process, we had asked for input from the building department, and they'll be included as we go along. But it's been maybe since last November when we last talked to them about it.
Because, so one other small question was, you talk about private lots not being covered in the staff report. You say you'd like to not cover them. I want to clarify something. I'll use Indigo as an example. Right now it's a private lot and you bring your car into the driveway for valet, so it's nothing on the street at all. That's a private lot, correct?
Correct.
If Indigo wants to get a street parking loading zone, they have to get a permit from you because they're using the street, then that lot is not called private anymore, correct?
It's still private, but the minute they take out a permit, then they have to comply with the regulations, which means that if their valet is in any way impeding, if they're parking in the hashed area or if they're parking a non-disabled vehicle, our intent is that those spaces should be for disabled parkers that are self-parking. The valet should find some other place to park their customers.
That's what I was hoping it was. I just want to clarify, because some people think that it's still a private lot and you can't have any control.
No, once they get a permit, game over.
Okay.
Then we start looking into it.
So, I'm sorry, so if they have the valet permit for the right-of-way,
Mhm.
somehow it pours over onto private property?
Right, because we're giving them a permit to operate in the right-of-way, and that doesn't allow them to break the law on private property. What it's going to allow us to do is to be monitoring. If they see that happening, we can say, you're violating the provision of this permit, and we can revoke your permit.
Are you through, Martha?
I am, thank you.
So I guess I have a few questions here. I took these directly from the minutes of November, so 6 months ago. You asked for our input. And
Shouldn't we be hearing public comment before questions from the committee?
Either way.
okay. Well, let's get that out of the way. Let's have public comments first.
We have one public comment from Will Reeling. Would you like to speak now?
Good morning, committee. Will Railing. First I want to say I think this is a really great process and a really great model going forward. This committee is being consulted, this committee is having input, and it's already made a difference. I want to distinguish between what you're asked to do now versus another project where you were asked to make input, which was the Cabrillo Pavilion renovation. And because this is in a way more of an opportunity. Sometimes the city might come to you and it's a rather urgent decision that needs to be made. Cabrillo Pavilion was like that multi-million-dollar project in the works. they needed to know that what they were doing was okay, and they needed to know now. This, I would distinguish, it's a new ordinance, it's a new city program. You heard mention that there are some valets operating now. How many, just ask yourself, how many do you actually know of around town? Certainly, I know of a few, but I can't say it's a rampant situation. And this is a new city program that will be forever, essentially. And so it's really important to get it right, would be my advice. I have listened, I attended one of the previous hearings. I listened to the other one on the tape because I was very surprised in the staff report to see what sounded like you had already approved not complying with ADA. And that concerned me very much, and I think it's just a mistake in the report, because when I went and listened, there was no such comment made by the committee. The comment in the report is that the committee expressed flexibility in difficult locations by being willing to consider having valet parking operations on existing city streets located as close as possible to driveway approaches and/or existing ADA street ramps. Now that actually has gotten translated into the ordinance and rules, saying that these locations do not have to comply with ADA unless there is new construction of a building adjacent after the ordinance takes effect. So in other words, the day the ordinance passes, if you approve it today, it actually won't apply to any place. It will apply, full accessibility will not apply to any place unless a new building gets built, which, as you know, doesn't happen very often. Most projects are renovations. So I think it's important to understand what an ADA Title II program is. We talk about ADA, ADA Title I, as you know, is employment. Title II is public government, and Title III is private property. And under Title II, it's really important. The city, ever since ADA passed, has worked to try to fix past deficiencies over time. It's a process that you've been very involved in. That's what the transition plan is all about. This, from my outsider perspective, is unusual that a new program is being created, and as of today, it is designed from scratch to discriminate. Okay, that you will have people allowed to take over a curb in the public right of way for a specific purpose in which the code clearly requires accessibility, but they won't have to provide it because it's inconvenient and costly to build a compliant loading zone. So I would like to suggest as a process going forward that you consider continuing to work with the city to hammer out these kinks and make sure that it really is clarified that the locations will be accessible. And one way you could do that, I'll just throw out, is put together a subcommittee of perhaps 2 members to work with Victor and staff to get the details worked out. That way, because part of the problem is this Brown Act, and in closing, I think that if you could have perhaps a couple members where they could meet with Victor, get these details hammered out, and then come back to the committee, and I think it would be a lot safer process.
Close up, Sue.
Okay. I think it would be a lot safer process if that's something. So, the devil's in the details, and what I'm seeing in this document doesn't match the sort of verbal promises that have been made. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Good comment.
Thank you, Will.
Well, that brings to mind kind of what I mentioned before. I went to the minutes of 6 months ago, and one of them that did not get answered, many of them were. We asked for a lot of things, and you did put quite a few of those in. The ones that I'm curious about, what ADA professionals were used to guide this process? And has anyone looked at Chapter 5 of the ADA? I'll bring this up later, but there's nothing in the ordinance or the rules or regs that tells these people what it means to comply to ADA. Chapter 5 does that. I think the citation should be both in your ordinance and in the rules and regulations. Now,
We can do that.
okay. So, one question was, will fines be issued, one fine per location or one fine per operator? And the minutes said, city reported that it's still not established. Committee feels that they should be on a permit and location basis as opposed to the operator. Reading through this, I wasn't sure what the final thought on that was. Is it one per location or one per operator?
We haven't decided.
Okay.
I would love to hear your input on that.
Well, my feeling is that if it's one per operator, no one's ever going to enforce anything. Let's say an operator has 40 different spots, or 20, or whatever you say. If one location is not compliant, he loses that permit, pays a fine, gets it back. I know the city is not going to shut down an operator with 40 locations and lose all their income streams. So, to me, the only fair way is to say it's got to be per location. That's my thought.
I don't have a problem with that.
I don't know if anyone disagrees with that, but if it's per operator, I don't think anyone will enforce this.
Sort of related to that, our intent, and I apologize if it's not clear enough, but our intent with a violator, and especially somebody that maybe has been warned, and then they continue to violate, that they would not just be shut down at that one location, but at all locations.
Okay. But then the city's saying we're not going to take, and you're going to lose an income stream, and you're going to get people mad at you, and you're going to bring lawyers in and stuff. That's what I conceive.
Well, the sponsor, the business owner, has the option of hiring another valet operator. There are
Okay.
several in town, and we've had occasions, I'll mention one at the Reagan Center. We had one operator that was not able to comply. We told him he was not going to get a permit anymore. The Reagan Center hired somebody else.
Okay.
Oh, that's how it works.
Yes.
Okay, now, this comes up with what our public speaker said.
I want to comment that I'm in support of the enforcement as, that portion of the enforcement as drafted. I think that it should be, the enforcement should be against the operator and not the location. I appreciate Jim's position, but I just don't want there to be any misconception that the entire committee's in agreement on that. I think that needs further discussion.
I agree with that too. I'm just afraid that the city will not shut down a complete operation. If they would, then that's great. The operator should be responsible. Okay, this is a major point to me. It was mentioned in November that valet parking provided in the public right-of-way is a program of the city, which means you cannot discriminate with regards to the ADA, and it needs to be held to Title II requirements. Now, that was asked in November. I still don't see that in any of the new documents. So 6 months later, that item has been dropped completely. If you have
You're talking
room for
about Title II, is that what you're asking about?
Pardon?
Title II is the
Yeah. If you have some ruling from someone that says it's not a Title II program, then I'd like to know that. But most people you talk to says no. If the city has an ordinance that has a program called valet parking, that it is a city program, which means it's Title II and it can't have any discrimination, which this one certainly does. So that's one issue from the minutes of November that still hasn't been answered. So I think that's a very important one.
Just a note on time, we're over time on this item, so just to
Okay.
keep us going. I know we could talk all day on this topic, but we want to get.
And if we need to come back,
Okay.
we're perfectly.
Can I just read this, read it out, Kevin? We also asked in November that permit applications should be transparent and available for public view. Permits issuance and revocation should be by committee and published reviews as opposed to single staff member. A CAS, certified access specialist, should be involved in the interview. Okay, and that again is not here. The whole responsibility is up to the public works director, who probably is not an ADA specialist. It'll be a closed meeting, there'll be no record of it. So to me, that item that was brought up in November still needs to be discussed. And the last thing I'm gonna have to go over here, but when you look at section 5.4 and 6.4, under accessibility, are you there, Victor?
Yes.
Okay. we talk about new structures. I think at least it should say remodeled or permitted, because there's hardly any new ones, but there are many that are good remodeled. If the building department wants a permit for a new restaurant, I think that should comply, not just brand new building. And you also mentioned using the driveway as a ramp. That's not legal. There's no level landing spot, and they can oftentimes be too steep. But the major point I want to make to the whole committee is the ordinance is approved by City Council. The rules and regulations are a floating, it could be changed at any time and will never be acknowledged. So I think we have to have a lot more detail in the ordinance. Otherwise, we have no idea what Public Works will change an hour down the road or a year down the road. There has to be some guarantee of what it is that's going to be in place. But if you look, and I'll sum up here, if you look at accessibility 1, this is for structures that are brand new. You use the word full compliance with the ADA. Then B, you say you don't have to do full compliance. You just say compliance with the ADA. And all through the document, you talk about must comply with the ADA, but you're saying here in items 1 and 2 that you don't have to do it if you're an existing structure. I'm trying to speak as fast as I can, but do you understand that point? You're admitting to everybody that you're not asking for ADA compliance for an existing street or existing building.
Right, and then that's the challenge. We want to have ADA compliance. We want to comply with the spirit of it, but we also know that there are places that we can't issue permits for expecting full compliance with the letter of the law. So I guess what I'm getting back to what I originally said, and it'd be good to get some clarification, maybe a vote from you that clarifies whether or not we can move ahead with the concept, which is, are we going to demand full compliance with with the letter of the law at every single location, new or existing, or is there flexibility possible?
Well, I want to speak to that. I don't believe that we really signed on for being totally flexible, as seemed to be represented. And I would rather say, yes, full compliance and then exceptions as they occur, rather than saying our position is, well, whatever, and we'll try our best. So yes, I would like to say full compliance with the law and exceptions as necessary.
I agree.
Nick, I know you have a few comments.
Yeah, I have extensive notes, and I'll try and keep it short since I know we're running short on time. I want to thank Mr. Garza for his efforts here. I see in the staff reports that our concerns have been well represented, with the exception of the what Mr. Railing brought up. And I also recognize that those things, we have a tendency to fill in blanks, lapses in memory, and I don't think that was intentional. But I also feel like now this board, this committee is giving kind of opposite direction, and I don't want it to be construed as a flip-flop, because all along we have been very firm in our concerns here. So down in the ordinance, section 5.4B2, as Jim and Will have pointed out, completely attempts to exempt all accessibility requirements for existing structures, and that's a problem for me. And all enforcement has been moved to the rules and regs, and as Jim has said, that just buries all enforcement and levels of bureaucracy and red tape. It makes it all highly discretionary. It can be changed by staff without review or by AAC or ordinance committee, and it lacks transparency of process, and I have a problem with that. But the irony of this is that with section 5.4B, there's really nothing to enforce with the entire downtown area exempted. And so that doesn't work for me at all. there's an underlying implication here that the valet parking industry's desire to increase market share outweighs the civil rights of disabled members of this community, and that's unconscionable. This program should be for everybody, but it seems that great efforts were made to pay lip service to accessibility while ensuring that nothing is done to actually provide for our or protect our civil rights or those of the disabled members of this community, and it's shameful. I see this is a city program, and that businesses desiring valet parking in the city's right-of-way are required to make the necessary path of travel improvements for such new valet operations to be compliant with Title II of the ADA and Title 24 of the California Building Code for loading zones. And I think that I'd like to suggest to the members of the AAC that we might be able to avoid further having our thoughts misconstrued by, this has happened before. Justin Van Mullen took something slightly out of context and I feel we were misrepresented. So I think that we need to make our positions clear in a position statement that brought forth by motion and voted upon. And those can be included in staff reports instead of hearsay and
All right, I think point's taken, we gotta keep going, so if you guys wanna make a motion or make something formal, that'd be great, but we do need to, we're almost over time for the next item.
I would like to make a motion that the chairman appoint a subcommittee of 2 people to further study this documentation and get back to us or to Victor with a written recommendations, because things seem to disappear when they are merely oral.
I second.
I have a question.
Yes.
Would that be a subcommittee that would work with me?
Yes.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Great.
Would you like to have two
Yes.
people from this committee work with you?
Please.
Away from the
Yes.
thing? Would that be good?
Yes, it'd be great.
Anyone want to volunteer for that?
I would be happy to be involved.
I would do that too.
Okay, can we have 3?
Sure.
Okay, I would like to do it too. That'd be best, I think, take it out of the group and
Yes.
work with you.
Yeah.
Okay, but would you like to look into the fact, is this a program as defined by ADA? And if so, there is no wiggle room. So you need to get a ruling on that, because the DOJ would be interested.
The other thing I'm going to be looking into is how we can incorporate rules and regulation language into the ordinance. Usually they like us to keep it separate,
Right.
but that's an important question to sort out.
And I hope that people can look at everybody look at chapter 5 of the ADA.
Okay.
So we're moving that, we're gonna form a subcommittee of 3 of us.
Mike
to-
seemed a little, he paused at the idea of 3. Is that problematic?
Yeah, I was just thinking of Brown Act, I gotta check how many members can meet.
I think it can be 3.
Well,
Yeah,
officially they have
I'll-
7 members, right?
I'll look into that.
Okay, thank
But
you.
we only have 6 at the moment,
Okay.
so.
All right, well, thank you, but please look into the program, because that's the, I think.
Thank you.
The Access Board thinks this is illegal, by the way, if you read their documentation, so anyway. I don't want to
I'm all for
get the city in a
having
lawsuit.
No, I appreciate that.
This ordinance is important.
Thank you, Mr. Garza.
Thank you. Appreciate your input.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you very much.
Okay, a review of the curb cut, the blue curb, I'm sorry.
Yep, Nick,
Yeah,
you can do it from where you are.
okay. We have some printed handouts. I don't see them in this stack. And
I already opened it. I didn't print that out.
that's
Sorry about that.
unfortunate.
It is.
Can staff email the board?
Yeah, sorry about
Follow
that.
up, it's not so important that they have it here and now, I just wanted to make sure they had it after the fact.
Okay.
So, let me find my notes on this issue. One of the things I sent you had my notes, and back through my email to find it. Can we take a break while I look for this?
We're well behind schedule.
You had told me you had things printed and.
All that would have been printed is this list and the map, so we
Okay,
have
I had
those.
some notes.
I never,
Take it out of order.
yeah, I didn't receive any notes.
Well, they were in one of the printouts I forwarded you. But,
Do you take the items out of order since the building official's here?
We can, but
can we do that, please?
Jim is now left. I'm not sure where he went.
I think he's probably just went to relieve himself. Let's
We'll give him a minute.
Or maybe I'll find my notes first.
Hey, Jim. Nick's looking for some notes, so we're gonna move on to item 10 on truncated domes and take care of that while he looks for
Okay.
notes. Good.
Actually, I think
Let's just move ahead with the truncated dome item. You can get yourself squared.
Last meeting, I gave a presentation, I reviewed a presentation of different photographs of many inconsistent installations of detectable warnings and other things in the city that aren't consistent, which is needed for public safety. So I came up with 4 things that I wanted to have a discussion with the group, but some of them have been kind of partially taken care of, so I think I'm going to go with those 2 first. I had the pleasure to meet with Mr. Stuffler, building official, a few weeks ago. The first of the 4 items that I had, and they're in the minutes, was a need for reminders to city staff, design committees, and architects, planners, and engineers, professionals, to understand and adhere to the CBC code on detectable warnings. Mr. Stuffer said in the next few months, I think, 3 or 4 months, he is going to talk to design committees about many things, including the fact that the code calls for certain yellow, federal yellow, 3-foot domes. So that part will, because that's been a problem, they keep recommending other colors, and then they have to get changed later. So is that a proper interpretation of our agreement, that you will bring that to them?
You can sit there or there.
Oh, okay. No, let's head this way. Committee members, I'm Andrew Stuffler, the building official for the city. Good morning. So yes, a couple things. We just yesterday, I think it was, or maybe day before yesterday, we have selected dates in June to go before HLC and ABR to discuss some of the common accessibility design issues that we see get approved through the design process, but ultimately out in building plan check and out in the field, they end up becoming conflicts with the code. So some of those are the colors of the truncated dome, returns of handrails on stairways that don't, flatten out and project as they should, projecting handrails that go out and become a obstacle for people because they have no base on them and they can't be detected with a cane. So those types of issues, we're going to iron out our kind of top 10 list and go through that with them. And in the meantime, what we're trying to do is look at all the work on private property that's occurring right now and make sure our inspectors and our CASP building inspector, Rick Welch, that they're using the correct color of truncated domes, that they're putting them in the correct locations. Some of these projects were approved a while ago, and so some of them will have some omission, some error in the approved plan that no one saw. So we leave that to Rick in the field to try to work out and make sure that they put together and complete a project that meets the intent of the code, or ideally the exact word of the code for color and location.
I appreciate that. And why don't you stay there, because I have one more that I'll ask questions for you. Another one of my 4 topics that I thought the city needed to deal with was the need to to ensure that non-compliant installations be addressed and mitigated. If you're not aware of it, the building code says the building official, no matter who makes the mistake, planner, checker, contractor, whoever, has the obligation to make sure that the installation is to code. But this is probably a terrible job for you to actually go out to some contractor and say, by the way, we goofed up and you're gonna have to fix it on your own dime. So I know it's a very embarrassing, frustrating thing. It's hard to do. But, and I brought this up because there was some that I had mentioned to Mr. Stuffer years back that hadn't gotten taken care of. And he told me he had given them to other people and had gotten, I would say, erroneous answers. So he just said again, bring them back to me and we'll do it. So Mr. Stuffer has said, maybe in the past there was a problem here, but please bring me stuff that isn't correct. And as long as the code says it should be this, it has to be that no matter who makes the mistake, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So, but you know, it isn't quite as bad as you make it.
Okay.
The responsible party is first the designer, and then the property owner, and then the contractor. And then we're just there to try to verify and make sure everybody did everything correct. So while I know people think that if the building department doesn't catch it, then it's get out of jail free, but it really isn't. We can't catch everything.
Right,
We only have so many minutes to spend on every inspection. So.
We understand that, and I appreciate you saying that, to go ahead and keep bringing them to you. So those, that covered 2 of my 4 problems right off the bat for my presentation. Thank you. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, but we're available. Elizabeth Sorkman's here, one of our CASPs,
Okay.
who can offer some insight and
Well, that's
information.
good to know,
if needed.
'cause
And Brian Diamore, city engineer, is here to talk about the truncated domes and the
is
public
Brian
right of
over
way.
there?
And Jim, I would like to mention and get some distinction on the public right-of-way versus the private
Right.
parcel truncated domes. I don't know if we were going to skip over that, but I know that seems to be one of the main sources of confusion, and it'd be nice to clear that up
Well, I
here
thought I
today.
cleared it up before, saying there's 2 different codes that we have,
Mhm.
right?
I just need that.
Anything in the public right of way is under the ADA code or sometimes PROAG, okay? These 2 items were just had to do with the private property. But if I can restate, you all understand, right? There's building code on private property, which calls for 3 foot in federal yellow. The public works says 2 feet, and their code says colonial red or terracotta on a gray sidewalk. And then it has other options where there's not a gray sidewalk. One of the problems was at Hotel California, somehow they put in terracotta domes on terracotta sidewalk and left it there for, well, I thought November, it just got fixed. And maybe you can answer this. 4 of the 7 corners were fixed and the other 3 are still wrong. Can you tell me why, first of all, how it was left for all these months and passed and inspected, and then why they didn't fix the whole thing?
Can I come all the way up here to say I'm not sure?
That's good enough.
I don't know why it hasn't been fixed.
Okay.
So even today, you're saying there's still?
Well, as of last week, I don't
Okay.
get around that much, but I
Yeah.
went down last week just to check. The 4 by the hotel, the new hotel, are done.
Mhm.
But across the street where the old hotel was, and then where the museum is, there's 2 corners on the west side of State Street, and then a half a block up on the bridge.
Okay.
Still the same. It would be interesting to know how it got through the design, the planning, the inspector. Anyway, not a big deal, but in your code, you say on gray sidewalks, so that's the point.
Yeah.
But since you're there, let me ask you what
Sure.
the 3rd point was. I would like to see if we can get to it. Okay, and here's for Mike, and I redoing it. Currently, there are 2 codes in the city that govern tactile warnings. 3 foot yellow with Andrew's jurisdiction, 2 foot, and contrast is all you look at, okay? You don't even look at 70% just in contrast, but your colors say red or terracotta on a gray sidewalk or contrast, okay? So there's 2, I pointed out many times that there's inconsistency with these colors. Imagine being low vision and wondering what the difference between white, yellow, red, black, gray codes mean, or domes mean. It's very confusing to visitors and people. The simplest thing would be to do what other cities have done, such as Sacramento, San Francisco. I was just in Ventura and Oxnard last week. They all have 3-foot yellow. The building department, the Public Works just says, we're gonna make the same spec as the city. You have that right to make your own spec. So that's one way that you could just do it. And then the whole city would have the same exact markings no matter what. The other one is there are many people in the disabled community, the CAST people, the Department of the State Architect, who think that the California Building Code says it applies to public sidewalks. I am not the one to argue this fact with anyone. I would like to suggest that you, your department, and a CAST person from building department, and perhaps some people you could bring in, would just sit down and discuss this. Is Public Works required to follow this ruling or not? And if not, you could still do it mandatory, arbitrarily. You could just say, we're going to change the specs.
Voluntarily.
Thank you. So two things. Either just please make a voluntary decision to change the specs to the same as the city, so we are totally consistent, or meet with CAST people. I'm sure Ms. Sorgman could bring up some data on that, right? To Derek?
Brian.
Or Brian? Sorry.
Yeah, I can offer information on at least what I've researched with DSA and other.
Okay. Would you mind a meeting with the Public Works just to give your side of the story? Not your side, but that side of the story. Because you look on the web, there's many people saying that the building department is in charge of the sidewalks, so I'm not the arbiter. Okay. Can we do that?
City staff can look into clarifying if the CBC has any purview over sidewalks in the public right away.
Okay. And the last one, a little bit tougher, but it was the fact that some of the city departments are not getting building permits when I think they should. Whether it's Mackenzie Park or the Shoreline Playground, especially the Garden Street lot, all the waterfront lots where new meters were put in that were too high for accessibility, and no permits required for years. Now, I shouldn't say required. No permits were gotten for years. Garden Street was built without the required detectable domes. All I would like, again, is for city staff to sit down together and say, when do we have to get a permit? I understand if you're building a new sewer line in the street, you don't have to talk to Andrew, okay? But if you're building a parking lot that needs repaving, then maybe a path of travel and a bathroom. I'll mention quickly that Mackenzie Park was done totally wrong. I won't use the word illegal, I should. If it was done right, there'd be a path of travel along the fence line, there'd be probably an accessible bathroom, but there still is none at that park. So can we just come together and say, when do you have to go to get a permit and get a CAST review? Can you build a playground without anyone looking at the materials you're using? So can we just make some, I don't know who to make it to, Mike, but can we just somehow get together and have thoughts?
So, and for the record, this is Andrew Stuffler, the building officials. So committee members, just kind of specifically, Children's Park had a building permit, had accessibility review. We had some issues towards the end of the closure of the project.
Kids World?
No, the park isn't Children's?
That's Kids World.
Kids World, sorry.
Yeah.
Kids World.
That one was okay.
McKinsey didn't have a permit. That was before I came on board, but as I came on board, we worked that out. We ended up getting compliance with parking spaces. There was still a debatable issue of access, and that was a very interesting thing to watch when I first came on board. Somehow providing a dirt path from the sidewalk to the parking lot became a victory for some people, and I'm still stumped by that.
Oh, I can help you. When they did the work, they put in a barrier, and they didn't wish to remove the barrier. And he said it was normal but not necessary. And I was a new member of the committee, so I can tell you more about that.
Okay, well.
And my outrage.
Yeah, so I've made a focused effort personally to reach out to the different managers that are involved, and I think our relationships definitely are stronger and strong relationships. In fact, this week we were out looking at the Carousel House, just seeing at what work had been done there to see if permits were necessary, and there hadn't been significant work that required a permit. But there will be, and we talked about what permits would be required. So I think the relationships definitely are stronger, and we're doing a better job of making each other aware of what's going on and what their obligations are.
Wonderful, and thank you. That's all I was really requesting, to make sure this doesn't happen in the future. I know it wasn't your problem with Mackenzie and other things, but let's try to get tightened up and say, when do you need a permit?
And thank you for the progress with the Little Door Restaurant,
You're welcome.
which is open again.
Good to
Okay,
see.
well, those are the 4 questions I wanted to discuss, but does anyone have it? Are you satisfied with these 4 things being settled from my presentation?
I think so.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that concludes that one. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Stuffler
Thanks, Brian.
and Brian.
Thank you.
But if you could just call me or write me about the Hotel California.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thank you, Cass.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Sure.
Thank you, Liz.
Mike, I just realized that I missed the opportunity during committee member reports as well, so can we carry that over to the next agenda? Can you block 15 minutes to talk about the just accessible parking guide during committee member, the subcommittee reports?
To agendize the accessibility or the disabled parking guide?
Correct.
Okay.
I thought it was agendized today. I missed that opportunity. I was prepared to talk about it. So let's. It looks like the agenda was pretty packed today. So let's just give me 15 minutes next time.
Yep.
Great. So on to blue curbs. Let's bring up the map. So this is a map I was hoping to get everyone a handout of that they could take home and review. But I think I also sent a link to an interactive version. Anyway, the little background, in February of 2017, staff provided a blue curb map showing 73 blue curbs. There was some concern from Access Advisory Committee members that blue curbs may be disappearing in Santa Barbara. And so that map was an answer to that concern. And there was claims that some curbs had been actually added. 36 curbs were installed and 9 removed since 2010. So I've got around to auditing that document in March of this year, and I found that about 30 of the 73 curbs were what I would call acceptable. 28 had pretty significant deficiencies, and 15 of them didn't even exist, or they were duplicates. So I shared these findings with staff, and the response was that, oh, this is old data. Here's some new data, and I got better data. We included global information, data, and it showed 129 blue curb spaces. So I gave this data an audit, and with that GIS data, I was able to get some Google Street Views. So I didn't actually have to go around and look at all of these in real time. I created a formula that took the global positioning information and generated links to Google Street View, and I reviewed, and I found that of the 129, there are about 71 that I found were acceptable. They may not have been to code, but they weren't worthy of prioritizing for review, in my opinion. They were usable, they were workable, but I thought maybe some of them would be of interest to the Sidewalk Committee, and that they might find some opportunities there. So I asked that data be forwarded to the Sidewalk Committee. I assume you guys got that and have reviewed it. Of the 129, I found that 21 had some pretty substantial deficiencies, and there was 26 that were non-existent or duplicate or triplicate data in the records. So that information was forwarded to staff. Mr. Dewey followed up saying that he can provide a GIS layer that shows the blue curbs. I generated my own, which you see here, and I color-coded it. So the red are the ones that just don't exist, and the yellow are the ones that are deficient, and the blue are the ones that I found were acceptable. I have that map link that you guys can view if you want to drill down and go to the Google Street Views to see them yourself. I also have the consolidated data, that spreadsheet that shows the addresses and links in list form. I understood that they were printed for you guys today, but apparently that didn't happen, so Mike will send them on.
They're sitting on my desk.
Okay.
Stack of 12.
Accidents happen.
Could you show us an example of a street view, or are you gonna do that?
Yeah, actually, Tina can click in on, let's pick any one you want. I think it might be most helpful to click on the orange ones, because
The non-accept, or the
the
deficient.
deficients, yeah. And you can see some of the problems. Like here, we have trees and a mailbox. And so for someone like me with a side-loading ramp van, I would have to be parked in the red to get my wheelchair in and out of that. Otherwise, it's a pretty good spot if there was some guidance from Public Works that you can't put a mailbox there. There's another similar example where there's a dog waste collection bag dispenser like that, and so.
Nick, is the one on Anapamu near the UPS store, that big planter?
It's
Is that
certainly
on there?
listed here as a deficient one.
I thought that was almost.
It'd be good to show that one, I think.
Yeah, I think it would be best if the committee had time to click through these on their own, because there's a lot of interesting situations here. We obviously don't have time to review them all today.
That's wonderful.
And we can get this link then?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, see this one here, the blue curb, there's a big planter right there. What came first, the blue curb or the planter?
I'm assuming that the planter was there. In this situation, if staff can pan to the right down the block, I think this is a pretty easy fix. We just move repaint the curbs, move it to the first spot on the end of the block there, right in front of the Sansom Eye Care, which is probably what it's intended to serve. There would be, for somebody who had a rear loading ramp, they would have direct access to the curb brake at the corner. For someone with a side loading ramp, there's no barriers at all in that first spot on the block to the west.
Yeah, I just want to make a note there. Nothing's ever that easy. And once
Yeah.
you move a spot, you need to fully review it for
I
complete
need to
compliance of
understand that,
accessibility
because
and access to ramping. And so if we were to move a blue curb spot, that would require curb cuts and ramping. And so it'd be quite an endeavor to just move an existing spot.
And so I understand that because of that, there's resistance to create or maintain existing on-street blue curb parking. And I think it's very important that we maintain that and not move all accessible parking to the parking lots, pay lots, and structures. I think that, we need to get, I want to understand what the limitations are, and
It really comes down to the code requirements for installing a new blue curb ADA space. And so if we were to move it, that's the same as creating a new spot. And so it would have to meet the letter of the law. And then it just becomes a funding issue and a prioritization issue.
Well, if I'm understanding you, then it sounds like the planter went in after the space was created.
But I can't answer
Yeah,
that,
or
I
it
have no
was
idea.
built without
But-
proper attention to code.
Yeah, either way, the argument's not that these are correct, that they're out there.
Yeah, yes, and your argument is it's very expensive to fix it, and our argument is, well, that is almost beside the point. Because if it's inaccessible, is inaccessible.
I'm in full agreement it's inaccessible, but
Do we have public comment? Can we entertain public comment?
5-second public comment. That the blue curves being inaccessible currently is a great subject for the transition plan.
For the what?
Transition plan?
yes, yeah, the ad hoc committee.
Yes, which is just a plan to fix things over time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nick, can I ask you a question? You said that 20-some% were.
I don't have my statistics. The percentages
You said a lot of
actually,
them weren't even there,
Yeah,
correct? And you
right.
also said this is a brand-new data file.
Yeah.
Any idea why a brand-new data file
you know,
would have that many errors?
I don't know that it was brand new.
Okay.
It was newer, it was expressed to me that this was newer than the data I had been working from previously,
Right.
which was only a year old. But
Okay.
the data file also shared the last time, the date of last review or inspection. And I was really surprised to see that none of this had been inspected. Most of the inspection dates were 2015, a couple 2016, a couple 2014. So it looks like the last time there was serious review was 2015.
Just seemed like a lot of
And
errors.
some of them don't have any inspection dates. A lot of these non-existent ones don't appear to have been inspected.
Kind of hard to expect something not there.
Right, and what I see is like there's an ID on each spot and each sign. And what I found was that when I began to suspect that some were duplicates because of proximity, I was able to correlate that either the sign ID or the location ID was in fact duplicated in the data file I was given. But I want to know how the committee and how staff thinks we should move forward from here. I would really, like to see this work come to something. I want to make sure it gets incorporated into the transition plan. I want to make sure that the city's official map gets updated. I'd like to hear a report from the sidewalk ad hoc committee on the sidewalk infill and see if you found any good opportunities in this data.
I just want to say this is an excellent example of productive and providing information that the city can use. You put a lot of work into this, and it is very, very useful. And this is the exact sort of thing that can feed into the sidewalk and street and the ad hoc committee, and where we can. The end game in my mind is having a laundry list of items that we can then prioritize and work to advise on where the importance lies. And then so we can compare apples to apples. Is there a preference over repairing damaged sidewalk, or is this more of a priority? And then you can kind of get a sense for that. And we're just at the start of this Measure C funding. So there's a long process coming, but this feeds beautifully into that sort of list and that sort of analysis. So thanks for providing this.
It was a fun project, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I'm glad that it's found it's seen as useful, and I hope it leads to great things, because there's obviously a lot of things that need work here.
Would it be possible to at least update the information to correspond to what Nick was determined to be on the ground?
In our GIS system, or what information would you like updated?
Well, I'd like to have the non-existent places removed. If that's not too much to ask.
Mike, could I ask, what hoops does the city have to jump through to remove a planter if it means restoring a blue curb that's already there?
Or a tree, or a bicycle rack, or a mailbox, or a dog waste dispenser, or a, I don't know, there was a lot of things like
Any
that.
barrier.
Yeah.
That's a tough one to answer. I think anyone here can extrapolate the difficulty of removing a tree versus a planter versus a mailbox, or the mailbox is not owned by the city. So things that aren't owned by the city, we would have to, there's effort, time, and money, and somebody would need to be assigned to doing that, and it would have to be prioritized.
Well,
So I know
part of the effort. to
I know we talk
encourage
about a
you.
lot of things that need to get done, and our goal should be to prioritize what things need to get done. So
Okay.
it's easy to say, go out there and fix every deficient
Okay.
ADA stall. That would be
So-
potentially in the hundreds of thousands, if not more,
Okay,
of
I understand
projects
that.
that we would need to prioritize those funds, and
So let's talk about low-hanging fruit. A mailbox. Sounds like that might be a pretty quick fix.
potentially.
What other opportunities do you think might be equal? How about a bicycle rack in front of the courthouse? How about the dog waste receptacle? Would these be significant efforts to get relocated?
Time, labor, and money. So we pay prevailing wage or staff wages for things like that to happen. To move something like that would be, you're looking at a half day or a day of labor. So that just to give you the scope and scale, I'm not saying it's not impossible, but there's a process there.
Right.
And
Well,
so if we
okay.
start prioritizing that, it removes those resources from other things that we could be doing. So that's why I'm really looking for a prioritization.
Okay.
Is the group saying that this is now the most important endeavor, as opposed to,
I think that this, what Nick's done is fantastic. I think if we can blend the sidewalk repair and curb cut deficiencies into your database
Okay.
somehow, or have your technological expertise be applied to those locations as well.
Okay. So if
And then begin to prioritize according to cost implications and
yeah.
Can I add to that, Martha? Many of these problems are actually sidewalk blocking a blue curb. So this really dovetails with the sidewalk committee. So I think that might be the first step, that we take this to the sidewalk committee and say, hey, what's it gonna cost to remove this bike rack? What's it gonna cost to move that? But, because as Mike said, moving a blue curb might cost more than just removing the obstacle in front of the blue curb. So, but do you all agree that these are sidewalk obstacles at the blue curb?
many of the deficiencies are in fact sidewalk obstacles, and so I'd like to hear hear back from the sidewalk subcommittee which of these they're going to prioritize for addressing via that process, and then what remains, I will prioritize and figure out, what other options we have.
yeah. So you'll send us the link to Nick's files?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one question. Are you done?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that work. I have one comment here and then a question for Mike. I was looking at the web, as I always do, and found that Oakland has a very interesting blue curb parking policy. They require one disabled spot on every street if it has between 1 and 25 parking spots. If it has 25,
Every
26...
street or every block? Or,
Every block.
okay.
Okay. If there's 1 to 25 metered or signed spots, you have to have 1 per block. If there's 26 to 50, you have to have 2 per block and going up. This is every block. They got sued for this. This is their plan. They have a huge plan on how to do it in residential areas, or if a establishment wants an extra lot or an extra blue curb, how to get that. But I thought it was amazing. 1 per block.
So another thing I'd like to look into.
Can I just get the website?
Yeah,
Put it in minutes?
I'd love to share that website, and maybe staff can send
This
out a
is
link.
OAK 067278 .pdf.
On,
I think it's a very strong ordinance, but
I
it's
think
amazing.
that's the name of the file, but what's the website it's at?
Well, if you type it into Google search, you can
Okay.
get it.
Okay.
And if not, contact me. I didn't write down you.
I think that's great. I don't think it's realistic that our city is ever going to put one blue curb on every block.
I'm not saying it, I'm just saying, here's
But
what city.
I would love it if they did. I utilize blue curb parking all the time, and I notice it's going away. and my research supports that it's going away. And the staff's insight that the cost of installing them on the street is an obstacle, supports my belief that they're going away. And I'd love to see it on the transition plan, but I don't see that the transition plan is getting any activity or making any headway. And so,
Nick, maybe the question also is, what are the forces that are, leaning toward removing existing?
Yeah, I don't know,
grids,
it's
and-
the-
And how can we prevent those?
it's the nebulous label of staff. I never know who that is when I hear staff, and then it's a double-edged sword, because I can refer to staff and someone may take personal offense to that, and it's.
We're drifting a little and we're over
Okay.
time, so I think we've gathered the points from this and they all are very positive. And so my takeaway is I love doing things that cost a little amount of money and have a huge bang for their buck. So this is a list that can produce that. And so there's meat here that action can be taken from, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that went into it.
Can I ask one quick? So Nick, on your database, your spreadsheet there, did it say what the obstruction was? Is there a space to do
I
that?
made some notes, but I began to feel like my notes were becoming redundant. I was making the same points on a lot of different spots. Most of the deficiencies that I found came down to obstructions on the sidewalk, need for infill, things like that. There were some that were, it seemed like the private property owner had done some landscaping of their own on the public right-of-way, and presumably they did that in front of their own the parking space that they asked to be put in.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think those were an issue. Maybe some of those weren't even needed anymore. I don't know what the process is where, a property owner or a tenant requests a blue curb in front of their residence, and then they move on, and that now that's taking up valuable on-street inventory.
Well, I think that the downtown core might be the place to focus.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
attention on,
I agree.
or commercial zones.
Mike, I understand fully your point, but this Oakland and like Sacramento has to spend 20% of their transportation money for 30 years to fix sidewalks. So more to the other side is lawsuits are what drives these strong ordinances. So it's like not doing a slurry seal. How long can you avoid things before someone sues? Not that we're going to, I'm just saying that the strongest ADA laws in the state are all been done by lawsuits.
I have
It's a
one
sad,
more.
Very litigious.
sad thing that that's the case.
Well, unfortunately, people are often left with that as their only recourse, and so I struggle with that myself. But I do notice that staff seems to acknowledge that there may be some flexibility sometimes, like they want to exempt all of the downtown parking, but I would be willing to make some concessions for some blue curbs that could be easily cleaned up without coming into full compliance. And so, how do we balance that?
I know, and that's you personally, but it'd be impossible we try and find a middle ground when we bring things
Okay,
to
but,
the committee,
yeah.
but sometimes it gets adamantly shot down, sometimes there's approval there, sometimes not, and it's tough when it becomes more personal based than the group acting as a whole or trying to navigate.
But can we look at some of these on a case-by-case basis and see where, there's an opportunity, like to move the curb without doing, it would be a major improvement without going to the expense of full compliance. I think what that one on Figueroa would, just paint would give you the accessible.
I can follow up on that. I think I'm pretty clear on where we're going with this, and this is the first time we've had to look at this, so
Okay.
it can't happen instantaneously, but we can work
I
towards
understand.
these things.
Great.
So-
You can also bring it to the sidewalk committee too.
Great.
Mike, I have a question toward adjournment. Assuming our next meeting is August 17th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, my quick question is, I was reading in the memorandum regarding the valet parking ordinance that, apparently something's coming before city council in June the 18th?
The ordinance was supposed to be going to council June. I can follow up with Victor if he's gonna
So-
continue with that, or based on what we.
Can you let, send some communique to the committee? Because I'd like some of us to be there to maybe give public comment.
Yep, I
before
try
city
as
council.
best I can to
Because it's
forward out all
before our
those
next meeting.
pertinent dates, so I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
One more matter of procedure, sorry to keep you all, but, when, Councilman Dominguez spoke to us in February, he suggested a lot could be done via email.
Yes.
And, I'd like to pursue that. If can we have a discussion regarding the ad hoc subcommittee and the parking guide via email?
You can email me anytime.
Okay.
We've communicated over email a
Right,
lot.
right, but can that, so I need feedback from the rest of the committee. That's what I was hoping for today, was a couple of little specifics on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I have a question for staff that I was gonna bring up today, and I can handle that via email, but can you solicit feedback from the committee?
Yes.
Okay, great. So maybe we won't need to agendize that discussion in August. Maybe we can wrap it up before.
Okay, my final question is, no one wanted to.
There's several final questions here.
But I said I wanted to talk to you before. No one put Victor on the hot seat, but it bothers me that the downtown parking staff report and our staff report says something that is not in the minutes of the audio tape. It's already out there, it's in black and white. It can be used to say, oh, the AAC changed its mind. It's not the case. What do we do when we're erroneously cited?
I think you made that abundantly clear to myself and Victor.
But how do we get it to the public that we didn't say that? I mean, we know that you guys know it, but we can't say, oh, redacted or something, right?
The minutes from this meeting will be public.
Right.
So what occurs in these meetings will be best transcribed into those minutes.
But
And
if
anything
two
going
staff
forward.
reports say, I'm worried about the staff report being read by other people thinking, oh, the AAC said this. So am I being paranoid about it?
I have the same concerns.
Correct. In no time do we try and misconstrue what gets said. There's a lot of back and forth during these meetings. So
There was no blame on purpose, it's just that it's there in black and white.
it was still it wasn't expressly saying that you approved or disapproved.
Yeah, that word expressed support.
Correct.
A willingness to do
All right,
this.
we'll work on it.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay.
Tina, I'll be happy.
Can we adjourn, Jeff?
I guess we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.